Hello everyone. We're now beginning our Nanotechnology and Consumer Products webinar. Today is October 31st, 2014. This webinar is brought to you by the NAC Network, established at Penn State University, the College of Engineering, and funded in part by a grant from the National Science Foundation. This webinar is hosted by Maytech Networks, one of the centers in the Advanced Technology Education Network of the NSF. Today I'm really pleased to introduce our presenter and our moderators. You'll see my picture there on the lower right. I'm Mike Lasecki here at Maytech, the Maricopa Advanced Technology Education Center. And joining me from Penn State University as a moderator is Bob Ehrman of the NAC Network. Now I'll go ahead and say hi, Bob. I heard you come in there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say hi and also welcome everyone to this webinar. We really appreciate Dr. Vance taking her time out to perform this webinar. I think it's going to be very valuable for all.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. So Dr. Vance, as you can see from the brief bio here, is the Associate Director of Virginia Tech's Center for Sustainable Nanotechnology. You can see her background as a PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering from Virginia Tech. She has a lot of different research interests, which include looking at emerging contaminants such as nanomaterials and those environmental implications. You're certainly going to be hearing more about that today. Dr. Vance, Marina, thank you for joining us. And let me ask you a question. How did you get involved in this whole nanotechnology thing? What drove you towards it?
Thank you, Mike. It's a great pleasure to be giving this webinar today. To answer your question, I guess actually since my undergraduate studies, I've been interested in how people can be exposed to the environment that surrounds them. So in the past, I've studied volatile pollutants, microbes in the air, and then when I started my PhD studies, I got interested in nanotechnology and how people might get exposed to nanoparticles that can be in air and water or in their homes. So eventually that brought me into to looking at nanomaterials and consumer products, which is something we're talking about today. Does that answer your question?
It does, Marina, and thank you again for joining us. The floor is yours. Why don't you go ahead and click us to the next slide and take us forward.
Wonderful. All right, so today I'm talking about nanotechnology and consumer products. So the objective of this talk is to provide an overview of how nanotechnology is embedded into consumer products. First, I'll go through the definition of nanomaterials real quick, and then I'll talk about some nanomaterial properties. And then I'll go over the nanomaterial applications into consumer products. And finally, the main theme of this talk will be the consumer products inventory. And that's online at the address that you can see on the screen, www.nanotechproject.org/CPI. So if you want, you can open your browser on another tab and go to this website. You can do it during this talk and explore the inventory as I'm talking to you about it, or you can do it afterwards. So I guess there's no better way to start this than by asking you all a poll question. So I'd like for you to tell me what's your occupation.
Everyone, this is Mike. Please use your polling button. You'll see that up in the upper left of the screen, those horizontal bars. I see a number of people are already logging in. We'd like to know, what's your role? What's your occupation? Are you a student, instructor, industry, or other? So Marina, let's give them, they probably know who they are, so let's just give them another few seconds here, and then let's look at our audience. Okay, everybody, I'm going to count down from 5, and then we'll look at the results of this first poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Okay, Marina, looks like most of us fall into that instructor or researcher category, but we have people across the spectrum today.
Wonderful. It's nice to have a really broad audience to talk to. I see a bunch of people also did not reply. then that's fine. Hopefully all of you will have something to take home after this webinar. So I think on the next slide I have actually another poll question. I want to know how familiar you are with nanotechnology. Have you heard about it before? Are you a little bit familiar somewhat, or you know all about it?
So thanks, Marina. I'll just mention about how this works. Direct your attention, folks, to the top of the participants window to click on the button there where you'll see your choice. It's a pull-down menu. Hover over the A little icon there and your choices come up. So very good. I like this question, Marina. How familiar are you? Well, I'm not sure how many D's we'll have or how many A's, but I'm guessing most people will be in the middle. Okay, folks, make your decisions. Let's see. Let's give them one more choice. One more second here. I'll count down again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go ahead and see what they say, Marina. Let me reposition this thing here a little bit. Okay. Most of us say C and D. We've got quite a bit of expertise here on the audience. That's really good.
Wonderful. All right. So I'm talking to a room of experts. This will be interesting. I have a few introductory slides, but I can go through them quickly. And if you're watching, if you didn't answer and you're not familiar with nanotechnology, or you're watching this as a recording, I do recommend that if nanotechnology is something that's new for you, you can go to the archived webinars on nanoforme.org where you found this webinar, and they have Intro to Nano webinar and many others that you can watch to get yourself acquainted with the topic. All right, so I would like to start with an image of this beautiful piece of art. This is the Lycurgus cup. If you are familiar with nanotechnology, I'm sure you've seen it before. It's located at the British Museum, and it's Roman from the 4th century AD. What's special about this cup, aside from the beautiful craftsmanship, is its optical properties. So as you can see, this cup is green, but if you light it from behind, it looks red. And there you go. So that has something to do with nanotechnology. And we'll go back to the cup in a minute, but for now I would like to cover real quick what is nanotechnology. And there are multiple criteria. This definition was developed by the National Nanotechnology Initiative and then adopted by many other agencies. What they say is that first the material needs to be in the scale of about 1 to 100 nanometers, and that's approximate. It's also a source of some debate because what really matters is that this material has novel or enhanced properties due to its small size. So that means that the same material needs to present some new property when it's smaller as opposed to when it's in bulk size. And we'll look at some examples of that later. So just to give you an idea of scale, if you are not aware of that, a nanometer is a billionth of a meter. And if you're trying to find a nanoparticle on the surface of a soccer ball, it really is the same as trying to see a soccer ball on the surface of the Earth. So we're really talking about a very, very small scale. And also, a nanomaterial does not necessarily have to be that tiny in all of its dimensions. A good example of it is graphene. So it's a nanofilm. It can be called also a nanosheet. There are many other kinds. So they're very small in terms of the thickness. Let's see if that marker works. In terms of thickness, but they can actually be very long and wide in the other two dimensions. So that's called a 1D nanomaterial. A 2D nanomaterial, following the same train of thought, is one that can be very small in 2 dimensions, so very skinny in terms of the width and the height, but can be very, very long, such as a carbon nanotube or a nanowisc, a nanowire. I'm presenting examples here of carbon allotropes because they exist in all the 3 forms. It's very useful as an example. An example of the 3D nanomaterial is a nanoparticle. So they're actually very small in all dimensions, height, width, and length. So going back to the cup, the reason that this cup has this interesting optical property is because of the presence of nanomaterials. And the nanomaterials that are present in the cup are the same that I have in my lab. And here are some vials of these same nanomaterials. And they have two main compositions. And that brings me to the next poll question. I would like for you to guess what these two nanomaterials are. Here you go. Vial number 1 and vial number 2. Both of these, this is a picture from my lab, but both of these are present in the Lycurgus cup. So,
so
what do you
harder
think they are
question,
made of?
Marina. It's more complicated. Gold, mercury, gold, silver. Okay, everyone, make your guesses here as to what we're looking at. Okay, let's give people just a few more seconds to make their decision. Okay, I'm going to count down, Marina, from 5. Take your best guess. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's take a look at what they think here. Let me position this up there. Well, everybody says C. Most everybody says C. What's the answer?
Everybody says C. Yes, I am talking to an audience of experts. Number 1 is silver, and number 2 is gold. On to the next slide. So this was a trick question because gold nanoparticles, when they are in a liquid suspension, they do not look yellow. They have this cranberry juice sort of color. And silver nanoparticles are actually yellow when they are nanoparticles in suspension. So that's what confers these interesting optical properties of the Lycurgus cup, is the presence of these nanomaterials. So beyond optical behavior, there are other properties that are known of nanomaterials, and nanomaterials are used for those properties. I just mentioned optical behavior, but there's also electrical conductivity. Carbon nanotubes are known for being extremely conductive to electricity. Hardness and strength. Another good example is carbon nanotubes. You see this tennis racket here in the lower corner. They have been embedded with carbon nanotubes to increase their hardness and strength. Enhanced solubility is another property. Silver nanoparticles. If you put a silver spoon in water, obviously the spoon is not going to dissolve away. But if you put silver nanoparticles in water, they will dissolve away. They'll release silver ions, which can be toxic to bacteria and to viruses and other microbes. And that's why silver nanoparticles are used in products like this teddy bear. We're going to see a lot of this teddy bear in today's talk. Gold nanoparticles, cerium dioxide, those are some, I think palladium as well, some other nanomaterials that can be used as catalysts. And there are many, many other properties. We can have an entire talk just on these properties. So now moving on, my slides are moving very slowly. I don't know if it's happening for you as well. That's why there's a little bit of a pause between the slides. But moving on, I'd like to talk to you about the consumer products inventory. Since today's talk is about nanotechnology and consumer products, we are going to explore a little bit of this inventory that focuses exactly on that. So the Nanotechnology Consumer Products Inventory was developed by the Project on Emerging Nanotechnologies at the Wilson Center. They began their work in 2005. There we go. And this inventory has been growing little by little every year. It's been widely visited by over 200,000 unique visitors since they first put it online in 2008. And it's been updated about 20 times until 2010. And the reason I circle 2010 is because it is when the project sunsetted, so the inventory stopped getting updated. But even though the inventory stopped getting updated, it continued receiving a lot of attention, and it's been widely cited in the scientific literature, really as a testament of how nanomaterials are entering the marketplace and how we should be studying them more. So if you go to Google Scholar, you'll see that it's been cited over 2,000 times in scholarly articles, which is incredibly high for a website, or anything really. But the inventory has also been criticized for its lack of scientific data, because really it's just a list online of products whose manufacturers may claim that the product contains nanotechnology. So today I'll talk to you about a little bit of a before and after story with that inventory. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to use Benny the bear as an example. Benny has silver nanoparticles embedded into the inside foam and the fur on the outside of the teddy bear for antimicrobial protection. And if you went to the Consumer Products Inventory website before last year, this is what the page used to look like. So it belongs to the Project on Emerging Nanotechnologies, as I mentioned, on the Wilson Center. All that they really listed was a picture of the product, here it is, the name of the product, what company makes it, and then a little bit of information on what they say and what others say. So this is from the manufacturer's perspective, and what others say would be some citation from other sources. Could be Amazon.com, any other website that talks about that product, but not the manufacturer. And then there's a little bit of categorization. This product was categorized as under goods for children and toys and games in the country of productions, USA, and that's pretty much it. So then we got together with the Wilson Center here at VT-Sun, and we started working on upgrading, more than just updating, but really upgrading the inventory. So we tried to not only update the old entries, but really change the model in which the inventory worked. So in terms of updating the old entries, that just means going to the inventory and finding out if the product lines are still in existence, if the websites have changed, if those companies no longer exist, so then archiving them, and then adding all the new products that may have become available in that time. In terms of adding scientific validity to the inventory, we try to add a lot more descriptors to each of the products. So now if you go to the website, you can search by the type of nanomaterial that was embedded into the product, the size, the concentration, also the function of the nanomaterial within the product. So why is it that these nanoparticles are getting embedded into this product? In the case of Benny, we know that that's to confer antimicrobial properties, but that's not always the case. It's not always that simple. The location of nanomaterials within the product, so are the nanoparticles suspended in liquid? Are they embedded into a plastic or embedded into a metal? Or are they just on the surface of a fabric, for example? So these things will have a lot of relevance if you're trying to understand what will happen to these nanoparticles during the use and after the products are disposed of. We also try to add whatever published works are in the scientific literature about these products and life cycle assessment information, for example, exposure studies, and toxicity work as well. And then finally, we try to come up with a metric to indicate the quality of our own data. And that's called how much we know. And we'll get into a lot of detail of that a little bit later. So in terms of creating a sustainable model for this inventory, what we try to do was to add a crowdsourcing capability. So that means that anyone, any of you, can go to the inventory and request an account. Once you're given an account on the inventory, you can do a number of things. You can suggest new products. If you go to a store or online and you find a product that's not listed on the inventory, you can suggest that it gets added to the inventory. If you see a product that has not been updated and the website link has changed or a description or whatever, you can suggest edits to existing products, or if you find a mistake, you can point it out. And you can add scientific references. Say you're a researcher and you did some work on these consumer products, you can go ahead and add your own information to the inventory. And you can also post comments. So basically, we try to make it that the inventory has more of a long-term solution to continue living and continue growing. We already have over 200 users. They're not very participant in the inventory on an everyday basis, but it's nice that people have tried to log in and create new accounts, and they are exploring the inventory. So I think now is a good time to have a bit of a break for questions.
It is, Marina, and thank you very much. There's several questions that people are thinking about. How do you introduce this topic to your students? Several questions like that, and actually some of us have responded in the chat window saying we have some ideas and contact us. I like that feature, Marina. People can talk to each other in the chat window and exchange information. But what about yourself? Do you have ideas or perhaps websites that you know that use this concept, this nanotechnology and consumer products, as a way of introducing students, to the discussion, to think about things like toxicity and the environment and things like that? Are you aware of anything like that?
Actually, nothing comes to mind in terms of websites that are ready to educate the students on this particular topic of nanomaterials embedded in consumer products. I know about nanohub.org. I'm sure you guys at the NAC Network, I'm aware of that as well. NanoHub is a website that has a lot of information, just like nanoforme.org, on nanotechnology in general. When it comes to consumer products, I think that I would love to get in touch with people who teach these subjects. If they could go to the inventory website and find ways that students could interact with the website, because anybody can register for an account. And I would love to hear that students are actually going out and trying to find products that are not on the inventory, and add them, or trying to find errors in the inventory, trying to find entries that need to be updated. Those are things that could help us and possibly could be a learning experience for the student as well. They could feel they're participating in something greater.
I like that idea very much. One of our colleagues in the chat window mentions nano.gov, and I have to admit, I really like that site. I find myself going there, and they mentioned it's a good place to get some general information on the topic as well. I think they've done a good job with that website. Marina, do you know it, nano.gov? I
agree. I've only been there a couple of times, actually, but I really liked what I saw. Very good, very general information.
Bob Ehrman, might I invite you to come in for a moment? A couple of comments about potentially using the remote access to equipment through Penn State as a way of introducing students. Would you like to make a comment there, or add any questions you have?
Sure will. And the other thing I wanted to do is to give a shout out to, you're talking about how to introduce this into classrooms, and there's a lot of work that us and the other ATE centers across the country, as Deb is on, Deb Newberry is on, and Deb has a site, nano-link.org, our site, nanoforme.org. There's lots of ideas on an introductory material there that can be utilized there. We have a webinar that was done by Joyce Palmer from Georgia Tech. I think it was in January of last year, Mike. That has tons of information on how to introduce nanotechnology into your classroom. Don't reinvent the wheel. People have been doing projects all across the country on introducing nano into the classroom. We have a products activity. I know that people have done extensions on that, and giving people individual projects or group projects on picking a particular topic. So there's lots of stuff that can be done and is being done right now. Regarding the remote access, that is something. We have a network of remote equipment across the country, from Seattle to New York, basically New York State, and we have different hubs, if you will, and we call it remote access to remotely accessible instruments to nanotechnology, to nano equipment, and that's actually across the country, and you can go to our Nano for Me website, and you can bring Nano into your classroom utilizing that, and they can actually the students can actually control the equipment at various locations, be it from in Salt Lake City or in Texas or in Seattle or in Pennsylvania or New York, and that network is growing. So that can be done and brought into the classroom and have the students explore the nanoscale.
Well, thank you, Bob. Your voice is a bit hollow, but we got most of what you were saying. So, when you can, speak right into that microphone. But let me go ahead and thank you for the comment about those remote access. We put the link to both nanolink.org and nanoforme.org into the chat window. Here's a question. I don't know if you know the answer to this, Marina, but several people have wondered about the persistence of some of these nanoparticles in the environment. It's somewhat of a technical question, of course. Obviously depends on many things, but since nano silver is one of the largest things used in consumer products, right? Do you have a sense of what the persistence is, maybe even a half-life, or any ideas on that, or thoughts of your own?
That's a really good question, and one that we actually get quite a bit of. My PhD work was all done with silver nanoparticles, and I have a number of colleagues that work with silver nanoparticles in the environment. And the concept of half-life is not something that we normally use. I wouldn't have a direct answer to that in terms of a number, but I'd like to mention the work of a colleague of mine. His name is Ron Kent, and he just published some work in which he took these silver nanoparticles, he adhered them to a substrate, and then he left them inside a real full-size wastewater treatment plant just to see what happens with these silver nanoparticles if they end up in your wastewater stream. And they pretty much converted completely to silver sulfide. So silver is extremely reactive. Silver likes sulfur a lot. If there's sulfur in the environment, it's very likely to get coated. If you have silver jewelry, like an earring or a ring or whatever, you'll see that it gets darker over time, and that's a sulfidation process. So silver tarnishes very, very quickly because it reacts to sulfur. The implications for that to the environment is that when silver reacts with sulfur and becomes silver sulfide, well, it's no longer available to cause any of the harm that we've been studying, because the environmental and really the antimicrobial properties of silver are due to the reaction of silver ions with cells and other components of bacterial cells and viruses, and that's how they destroy them. So if the silver is already reacted, it's no longer available. Maybe I went into a little bit too much detail of that, but there's a lot of research out there on silver nanoparticles and other nanomaterials. It's very likely that once they reach the environment, they'll react very, very quickly. So it depends on where they end up first.
That makes sense, doesn't it? I have one other question, and I think your timing is perfect for today. Let's take one more. Someone wondered if you were to look at a material safety data sheet, or I guess they're called something slightly different today, you were telling me, would you see specific call-outs for nano features of particles, specific toxicities or handling procedures? I'm not sure you would. Do you have experience looking at those things, Marina?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes.
I'm looking at the chat window and it's very distracting.
Yeah, you're not supposed to look there. I'm supposed to look there. No, I'm kidding. Material safety data sheets. Would you find on them, I guess they're called safety data sheets, would you find specific information about nanotoxicity or handling of nanomaterials? Do you have any experience with that?
I don't have much experience on the safety data sheets or material safety data sheets. As far as I'm aware, there is no direct information on nano. They would really be, if a nanoparticle is sold or is part of a product that has an MSDS sheet or an SDS sheet, they would be listed just as a bulk material. So for example, if you have nano silver, it would be listed as silver. That's okay. As far as I'm aware. Some nanomaterials can be regulated under pesticides. Silver, for example, is regulated under TSCA, so they have some specific regulations if the new property turns them into something else. For example, nanosilver can be used as a pesticide, so it can be regulated as a pesticide, whereas silver cannot. But nothing specifically related to nano.
Thanks. Again, we're perfect on time. Why don't you go ahead into the presentation? We'll have another question break as you get towards the end of your material. Go ahead.
Wonderful. All right. So moving on. Now this is what the inventory looks like after we've performed our work. This is the version that went live around October last year, so it was a year ago. And this is the same page for Benny the bear that I showed you before. We still have the picture of Benny right there. We still have the information that we used to have before with the they say and other say, so just copied and pasted text from the manufacturer and a different source. So this stuff is pretty much all the same as before. What I'd like to really point out to you is this box on the upper right side. So this person has logged on to the system, so they have the ability to click here to suggest edits to this product or suggest a new product. They can edit their profile and they can log out. Please note the keyword here is suggest. So this inventory is still curated. What you're going to do is fill out a form that will say, oh, this stuff that the manufacturers say has changed. Now they say something else, and you can delete all this and add something else. But this needs to be approved by a curator, which in the moment actually is me, before it goes live, so that the quality is still ensured. Now, if you scroll down on that same page, you'll see the things that I mentioned before, the new additions that we made to the inventory. Everything in red is a link. So if you click on silver, for example, and that's a nanomaterial in Benny the Bear, if you click on silver, then you're going to be taken to a page that shows all the products that claim to contain nanosilver. Nanopart shape and dimensions, we have some information on that as well. The reason why the nanomaterial was added to the product, in this case, is for antimicrobial protection, and the location, so the nanoparticles are bound to the surfaces, and the potential exposure pathways, for example, dermal and ingestion, because you can say that a child might chew on this teddy bear and might ingest some nanoparticles. In terms of how much we know, this product is listed under Category 2. And I'm going to get into a lot of detail on this just now and explain to you what Category 2 actually means. And then you can see some additional information. This product is actually archived because the company no longer says that Benny the Bear has nanoparticles. They still sell the product, but they don't claim the use of nanotechnology anymore. So we archived it. And then you can post comments. So now, going back to how much we know. So we try to really come up with a metric that gives some certainty of our own data. So I'm going to start by explaining to you Category 4, but ideally we want all the products to be Category 1. So the lower the number, the better the product is. That's what you need to keep in mind. And starting with Category 4, so that's an unsupported claim. So that means that the manufacturer went and put in the word, we use nanoparticles or nano-enhanced, whatever it is. And they really didn't add any more information to back up that claim. No supporting information, nothing. It's just a blanket claim of nano or nanotechnology or nanomaterial. If the manufacturer actually added some supporting information, like maybe some TEM images of some transmission electron microscopy images of their nanoparticles, or a mention of size or size distribution, or a spec sheet, anything, then they get bumped up a category and they make it to Category 3. So those are products that are manufacturer supported in the claim of nanotechnology. To get bumped up to Category 2, that claim actually has to be verified. not only do you have to provide a spec sheet or some kind of information, this is really broad, but also there needs to be some third-party information. That can be something as simple as a quote on a newspaper or a different source, any source that is not the manufacturer. Now, for a product to be what we would love to have all the products be, which is category 1, an extensively verified claim, products need to have all that, and we're willing to even forgive these two as long as there's compelling information from other sources, and these sources need to be different from the manufacturer. They can actually be a patent that's, put in by the manufacturer, but it's something that you can see elsewhere, or a study. If you publish a scientific study about this product, it's really proving that the product actually has nanomaterials, and that was our objective here with this metric. And now a special category that I left for last is category 5. Category 5 is products that were not advertised by the manufacturer. They don't say anything about it being nano, but then somebody did a study on it and found nanoparticles being used on this product. So back to the inventory, we're back to the page for Benny, and Benny is listed under category 2 because the claim that they contained, that the teddy bear actually had nanoparticles was verified. And I actually did that as part of my PhD research. There's a destroyed Benny the bear in my lab that we took and melted and cut up and took to the microscope and actually found the silver nanoparticles and tried to see how much of that will leach out into saliva, sweat, urine, any biological media that might get into contact with this teddy bear during its normal use by children. All right, and if you keep scrolling down, what you're going to see is a list of products. This list is generated by the website based on similar nanomaterials or similar categories. And the next one is, it's actually Donnie the dog. I bet it's Benny's cousin. So now we have another poll question, and you might actually know this number because it was shown on a previous slide, so maybe you remember. But roughly how many products do you think are listed in this inventory that I'm talking about today?
We're going to see how well they were paying attention, Marina. Okay, let's give them, folks, make your choices here. Use the polling button. I see everyone's putting their things in. Roughly how many products do you think there are listed in the CPI? Okay. I'm going to force you to make your decisions quickly by counting down from 5. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, most people say greater than 1,500. A fair number at about 1,000. Quite a few is what people are suggesting, Marina.
All right, wonderful. So here's the data overview on the inventory. Most of you are right. The inventory currently lists over 1,800 products. Interesting to note that over 600 of those are actually archived, so they fall under the same category as Benny the Bear because the availability of the product, they can be out of stock or the company no longer exists or something like that. We kept them in the inventory, but we moved them into this archived category. Or if the same product still exists but the nano claim can no longer be ascertained, we also move them to this archived category. We believe that the number one objective of the inventory is to document how nanotechnology is entering the consumer products market, so deleting these products would really do us a disservice. So we kept them there so people can actually see historical progression on the inventory. So in terms of the product categories that we have in the inventory, the most popular category by number of products is the health and fitness category. We have almost 1,000 products that fit into that, followed by home and garden and automotive. I guess I forgot to switch these guys. Automotive has beat food and beverage in the past few months since I last made this figure. And within health and fitness, the main products are within personal care, clothing, cosmetics, and here are some examples. Here's a t-shirt that has nanoparticles nanoparticles embedded into it, a curling iron, a hair dryer, and here's a throat spray that has colloidal silver, which is another word for a liquid dispersion of nanoparticles. And moving on, another poll question. So what do you think is the most popular nanomaterial composition in the CPI? Carbon nanotubes, silver nanoparticles, titanium dioxide?
Boy, these are all common to some extent, aren't they? The question is, which is the most popular in the CPI? Let's see what they think here. Let's go to think about this one a little bit and see what people say. I'm wondering about this one. I'm not sure I know the answer. Marina, let's give them just 5 more seconds. Make their guesses. 5, 4. See what they know here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here's the, oops, operator error. Here we go. Let me position this. Everyone says it's those silver things, Marina.
Yeah, silver nanoparticles. And once again, you guys are all right. My questions are too easy. Everybody's getting them right. Silver nanoparticles are by far the most popular category, over 400 products. And here's Benny again, giving us another example. Titanium would be the number 2. And here's an example of, it's a sunscreen. It's widely used in sunscreen and other applications like paints to make things very white. Carbon, which includes all allotropes, carbon, nanotubes, fullerenes, graphene, even graphite in some cases, is the number 3. And here's that tennis racket that I showed you before as an example. Silicon and silicon dioxide, are widely used as well in consumer products. And here is an example. Nano Lifeguard is an automotive glass treatment. So you put it on as a film on your car windows, and it makes them more hydrophobic. So the water droplets will beat up and not wet the glass. Zinc, once again, zinc oxide. I'm sure you all know that it's in sunscreens and other cosmetics. And here's an example of gold nanoparticles. Miso Gold is actually sold as a supplement, so people can drink that for health reasons. In terms of the location of nanomaterials, the most common category is nanomaterials that are suspended in liquid. Here's Miso Gold again, and liquid does not really mean water. It can be a non-Newtonian fluid or something like a sunscreen. Surface-bound particles would be the second most popular category, such as Benny the Bear or any clothing that you can imagine. Particles would be bound to the surface of those fibers. It's not necessarily always the case, but we'd have to buy the product and really study it deeply to find out if the particles are on the surface of fibers or embedded inside the fibers. Nanomaterial suspended in solids, once again, here's that tennis racket. You have a solid matrix, and you have carbon nanotubes that are embedded inside that solid. You can imagine that it would be very hard for those carbon nanotubes to actually leave that composite. A nanostructured surface would be something like this film, right? You spray the product and you form a film. So the surface is nanostructured. Or in bulk, you have a lot of electronics, processors and chips that are nanoscale in size. So that would be nanostructured bulk. And finally, bulk would be just particles sold in powder form, which is the case for a few of the products, only 24 of them. So in terms of the potential exposure pathways, the most likely exposure scenario is dermal, because we're most likely to touch these products more than anything else. Some products are meant to be inhaled, such as this throat spray, or actually meant to be sprayed into your mouth and might incidentally be inhaled. And the third pathway would be ingestion, because some of these products are meant to be eaten. It's very, very important, I believe, that I point out that exposure does not equal toxicity. Exposure means that these particles might get in contact with your body, but it does not necessarily mean that they would be toxic to your body. And next I have actually another poll question for you, and this is just a reminder of the categories that I presented to you before. Remember, category 1 is products that are, we like them a lot because the manufacturer did a really great job explaining the nanomaterials that are embedded into them. Category 2 is actually very similar. The claim that they contain nanotechnology in some form has been verified. And then it goes down and down until category 4, in which they really didn't say anything about why nanotechnology was embedded. So my question for you is, what do you think is the most popular category in the inventory? And here is the actual poll question. Answer A if you think it's categories 1 or 2, so verified claim, these products that listed a lot of information. Category 3 would be manufacturer-supported claims, so they have a spec sheet or a picture. Category 4, products that have no information whatsoever beyond a claim to use nano. And category 5 are products that actually the manufacturer doesn't say anything about the nano-ness of the product, but somebody else did. It could be a news source, it could be a researcher, or anything else.
While we're responding here, Marina, there is a question that came up in the chat window, and I'm sort of curious too, if as you go through the balance of your thing, if you think about examples of what a category 1 or 3 or 4 or 5, you mentioned several, but if you come up with a couple of examples, we'd be interested. That'll help us relate to this. But right now, let's finish this polling question, everyone. Do you think it's A, B, C, or D? I put in my answer. I hope I'm right. This is a harder one, Marina. Let's count down. 5, 4, 3, 2. I'm getting ready to close the poll. Okay, poll's closed. Let me reposition this slightly. Most people think that it's B or C that is category 3 or 4. What do you think, Marina?
All right. Category 3, manufacturer-supported claim, and category 4, unsupported claim. Well, the answer is in the next slide. So the vast majority of the consumer products in the inventory are under category 4. That means that if you go to the manufacturer's website, they say nanotechnology enhanced teddy bear. Benny the Bear used to be in this category until I did my research on it and other people did their research on it. All that the manufacturer said was, uses silver nanoparticles for antimicrobial protection. That's it. We don't know how big those particles are. We don't know if they're inside or outside. We don't know the concentration, how many particles or how many grams of particles. We don't know anything about it. I guess Benny would be an example of that. An example of category 1, I remember this product. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it was a lubricant for cars, and it used these onion-shaped fullerenes. So it would be like carbon nano onions. And imagine fullerenes, one inside the other, and they use that as a lubricant, like I mentioned. And they actually had patents, and if you go to the manufacturer website, they had some studies that they published. They actually developed these nanomaterials, and when they developed them, they actually published them in the scientific literature. So if you go to the website, there's the information readily available. You can see how big they are. You can see the concentration and everything. I hope these two examples were elucidating enough. Category 3, like I said, some products actually have, if you click on the link, they actually have a spec sheet or a PDF that you can look at that has some pictures of the nanomaterials in the product, or even mentioning the concentration, which is common in some cases. For example, if you have supplements or a product in liquid form, they won't just say it has nanoparticles. It will say the percentage concentration of those nanomaterials. So then they would fit into category 3. But usually information on size is actually very rare. And you start getting into some of those issues that you have with the industry where they're trying to protect their intellectual property and trying to protect their products. So that's probably one of the reasons why so many products are listed under category 4. moving on. Finally, this is the last poll question, I promise. I'd like to know if you have a consumer product that is nano-enabled. So click A if you know of at least one product that you have. Click B if you think you have more than one product in your home that you've seen that they actually have a label that says, I use nanoparticles, if this uses nanotechnology or something. C if you have no idea, and D is if you're actually scared of it. So you intentionally avoid
I
them.
might suggest, Marina, that if people want to use the chat window, they could describe, if they have one, they could put it in there in case they want to let us know. I'll tell you my answer while we're waiting. I couldn't resist getting the Nano Wax for my car. I just had to try it. I don't know why. It seemed to work okay. Okay, folks. Yeah, well, I think so. Yeah, it's easy to do it. You can see some of the folks putting in. Boy, we got a lot of things. Mostly nano silver, right, in your socks and shirts. Oh, right, the toilet plunger. That's the hydrophobic coating on the toilet plunger. Lots of interesting things. Folks, take just a moment and finish your polling. We're having fun with the chat window here, Marina. Let's give a countdown on the poll. Most everybody has responded. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. More than one product. Look at that. Most of the people here, several of us aren't sure, but most have more than one nano product. Interesting.
Wow, that's very interesting, and I wasn't expecting that at all. I was expecting most people to say C, that they don't know. To be honest, at my home, I don't know that I have any nano products outside the lab. In the lab, I have drawers full of them, but at home, I don't really have them. So this is a surprising answer. I'm glad I put in this question.
As far as you know, you don't have them. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
As far as I'm aware, because like I said, the labeling information gets really complicated with these things. So what I'd like to ask you to do is to look at your products, see if they have any information beyond the fact that, for example, your Nano Wax, they say it's a nano product, but what makes it nano? Is it because you're forming a nanofilm on your car, or is it because it has nanoparticles, or is it another reason? It would be really interesting to know. And the way you can participate is to log into the inventory. You are now all experts in the consumer products inventory after this session. And it's very, very easy. If you go to the website that I mentioned, www.nanotechproject.org/CPI, the first window that you see has this little window, little box. It says participate. You can request an account. It may take a few days for your account to be approved because somebody manually goes in and only approves accounts in which people explain why they would like to join. So we avoid people who don't really mean it. And once you're logged in, you can look at the products you have in your home, see if they're already in the inventory, learn more about them, or add your own information to help the inventory grow. And the reason we do all this is not just because we want to have all these numbers online. I mean, it's really, really interesting to try to understand how these products are entering the marketplace. And if we understand a little more about the incorporation of nanomaterials into products, that might give us an insight on all these other parts of the nanomaterial life cycle that we don't necessarily have an access to, such as nanomanufacturing, the nanomaterial disposal. And then once we understand the products and how they're most likely to get used, we can also study their environmental implications, see how these products are actually entering the environment and how they may affect both the environment and human health. So with that, I would like to open the floor once again for questions, and thank you so much for listening to the webinar today.
Marina, I'm going to go back. Would you let me go back one slide here to, I like this nanomaterial life cycle because it invokes several questions that have come up in the chat window. Look at that lower right corner, nanomaterial disposal. I mean, suppose sometime in the future, here's one of the questions, we suddenly discover that nano silver or fullerenes do have properties that we might not have anticipated. Do people think about disposal or storage of these things? What do you know about that?
Part of my own research group here at the Virginia Tech Center for Sustainable Nanotechnology, VT-SUN, studies exactly that. So being a center focused on sustainable nanotechnology, we were really interested in what happens to nanomaterials in the environment. So what happens after these nanomaterials get disposed, and they may get incinerated if it's a solid material. If you end up in a landfill, that's a more easy to understand end of life. But if nanomaterials get incinerated, what happens then? One of my colleagues has done some research to find that these nanoparticles, some of them can actually serve as catalysts and change the incineration process. So we're not only looking at how these nanomaterials can leave the incinerator and end up in the environment. That's very unlikely to happen because incinerators have very good nanoparticle or particle systems for catching the particles before they reach the environment. But they might actually serve as catalysts and then affect the emission of organic compounds. So other pollutants might come out of the incinerator because those nanoparticles were added into the products. There is a lot of research ongoing in terms of disposal and what happens in the environment once these nanoparticles reach it. And a lot of questions have still not been completely answered. There's a lot of research that's still ongoing and still needed, even though we've been doing this for the past almost a decade now.
Interesting. I have another one that's the environmental side. Let's turn our attention a bit. I found this to be an interesting question. Are you aware of any therapeutic uses that might have gotten a nod from the FDA, therapeutic uses of nanotechnology that might have received approval? I'm not aware myself, but I'm wondering if you were.
I'm not aware of that myself. Yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't. There might have been, but
what about you, Bob?
know.
Are you available to click on here for a moment? Or are you aware of any FDA-approved therapeutics? I'm thinking, dermal transmission could be a good thing if you're trying to carry something past that barrier, something therapeutic. Just a thought.
Well, I don't know.
Ideas? Yeah.
Mike, I don't know about how you define it, but I know from some pharmaceuticals and things have been approved. I know for cancer treatment, I believe it's for breast cancer, there's Abraxane, and there's some other therapeutics that are out there for that are in drug delivery, and there are various stages of approval, but I don't know of any. I know of Abraxane. I'm pretty sure that is one that was classified as a nanomaterial. It was on the old website in the medical category, I believe.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. There was a couple others, but right now they're not coming to mind.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you, Bob. Go ahead on to mute for a second there. Marina, here's another question, and I think I may put up our survey as we're wrapping up here today. What about the immune system, right? So you've got this nanoparticle which has its antimicrobial features. Any evidence that you're aware of that there's an impact or some sort of effect on our own immune systems? I'm not aware of any, but that doesn't mean anything. Do you have a thought there?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and definitely the answer will really vary a lot depending on the type of nanomaterial that you're dealing with. Because you said antimicrobial, I'm assuming it's silver, so my answer will be with silver nanoparticles. I'm not aware of research on the health's immune system, the human body's immune system to silver nanoparticles. What's interesting about them is that those ions that they release that are deadly to bacteria and viruses and other microbes to the same extent or even more potent than antibiotics, is that those are not as toxic to our bodies because the human body is actually extremely smart in getting rid of these particles. So if you have ever heard of Argyria or the blue men. You can go on your favorite search engine and search for that. You see an image of this guy that his skin has turned into a grayish blue tint. That happens if you consume colloidal silver or silver nanoparticles for an extended period of time. That's the way in which our bodies deal with those nanoparticles. They end up depositing, our body deposits the silver nanoparticles on the dermis, and that's cosmetic, a benign condition, but it's irreversible. So once those nanoparticles deposit on your dermis, it's the deeper layer of your skin. They'll just stay there, and then they'll turn your skin a little bit darker because the silver will interact with the light and change color. But there's a lot of research going on whether or not silver nanoparticles can increase the antibiotic resistance in bacteria, which is very, very important, something we should be looking into. But as far as our immune system is concerned, I don't think there's that great a risk. The greatest risk that you can be exposed to with silver nanoparticles or any other kind of nanomaterials if you inhale them. They can be toxic to your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, if you put these particles in your lungs. But if you ingest them, your body will deal with them in a completely different way.
Those are good comments. Marina, let me ask our audience to help pay the bill. I know that sounds funny, but I'm going to launch a survey here, and that allows us to report back to the National Science Foundation, our sponsor, about the impact of these webinars. So let's see if I can get this right. Hold on just a minute, Marina. I'm going to try launching the survey, and then while we're doing our final questions, people can respond to the survey. Let's see if it comes up here. Yep, there it is on one of my test machines. Good. So just take a moment, folks, and click on those radio buttons and fill in the comment boxes on the screen while we're wrapping up here. You know, one question that came up, and it was one of the themes of the discussion today, is the fact that products are losing evidence of their nano content on the labels, right? I know this myself. I went looking for, in the cosmetic section of Walgreens, looking for something that said there's nanoparticles in here. Years ago I found that, but recently I wasn't able to find that. Do you see a trend, Marina, that people are sort of downplaying the nano features in many cases?
Yes, I do, actually. That's been happening to some extent. If you were able to go back to the inventory back in its early days, in the mid-2000s, when nanomaterials were first hitting the consumer product market, it was seen as something high-tech, something fancy and maybe used as a selling point. So it had a big wow factor. So nano was added left, right, and center to a bunch of products, and we saw some that were really funny, like these bracelets that you put on the bracelet, and they have some nanotechnology power that will make you happier and will make your life better. Honestly, that was a product that we found online. So some of these, some companies really were adding nanotechnology to anything as a way to help sell more products. Even some large companies in cosmetics and others added nanotechnology to their products, and then people started getting really scared. We heard about people complaining about sunscreens and how they did not want nanoparticles in their sunscreens, and the tone of the conversation really changed over the course of maybe 5 or 7 years. And now you see the same large companies, they might still be using nanoscale materials, but they're not saying that anymore. And some are going as far in the other direction as to say, we do not use nanoparticles, we only use microspheres or micron-sized particles in our products.
So they're playing the size game. Oh, no, it's not nano, it's sub-micron. I can just hear somebody saying that. That's interesting, isn't it? You know, this whole topic, as we're asking people to finish inputting their survey responses today, it seems to me it's a great way of getting our students thinking about science and technology issues, right? There's not always a clear answer to these things. There's a a balance here. You can have a good classroom discussion with your students about what the potential societal implications are. And I know your work and others and other websites do focus on that. So I think there's some good opportunities to engage our students. I think you would agree, wouldn't you, Marina?
Oh, definitely. I think the fact that these nanomaterials are in consumer products brings this technology closer to our everyday lives and can be used very easily as a teaching tool to get into the properties of the nanomaterials and that kind of that branch of science. I think it's a good opportunity for teaching.
Sure, and even thinking about, what does persistence in the environment mean? Well, I guess that's a topic for another webinar. Marina, I'm going to close the survey here. I'm going to count down everyone, so please click on your buttons and finish typing in your things. I hope I don't shut anybody out. And then we're going to wrap up for today. Just an excellent webinar, perfectly on time. I'm going to give them a countdown to the close of the survey. Okay, everyone, make sure you submit your survey when you're done. 5, 4, 3, 2, here we go, 1. And we're back. Now, folks, if you're joining us live or if you're watching the recorded vision of this webinar, especially for those of you doing the recording, you can click on the survey link in the recording and we'll see the input from you as well. Thank you. By the way, you will receive probably within 48 hours access to links to this recording, slides. There's not a handout for today's webinar. Typically there is, and you can always access this from nanoforme.org/webinars.php. So you can always access these links, but we'll send you, everyone that's registered for today, you'll get a link for this thing. By the way, if you attended a live version of this event today, well, it's not quite an hour and a half, but we'll call it that. You could ask for a certificate of participation by emailing Sue Barger, S-B-A-R-G-E-R. You can see her email there at engr.psu.edu. Penn State address, of course. So if you'd like a certificate, you can put it up on the wall or show it to your mom, whatever you'd like to do. Bob shows it off. He gets one for every one, right, Bob? Hey, Bob, speak distinctly as you can into the microphone because you're a bit fuzzy today. Tell us what's coming up in the NAC world.
Sure. This is the first in a series of webinars for 2014-15 school year. We'll have several of them. The next two will be in January and February of next year. And the first one will be on nano and electronics, and the second one will be about remote access that we talked about earlier, very briefly earlier. Remote access labs for your classroom, somewhere you can bring nano into the classroom. And then we do have workshops coming up. We're fully subscribed to this next workshop, which is actually, we have a waiting list for this workshop coming up in November for a hands-on introductory workshop in nanotechnology. Never fear, though, we will be offering it again in May of next year. You can look at the Nanotechnology website and find access to that. And then in April, please start registering now for the April course resource workshop, which is a series of 2 workshops, the first of which will be offered in April of next year, April 13th through 17th. This is a 4-day workshop for those who are implementers of nanotechnology and nanotechnology workforce education programs. That's the most immediate things coming up on the schedule. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the time for the shameless plug for our offerings.
Sure thing. And folks, that officially brings us to the end of our webinar today. Marina, thank you again. It was just I like the way you pull things together, great imagery on the slides, gave me some ideas about how I might want to introduce this topic into my chemistry class, into my science class, because I think, I don't teach nanotechnology directly, but certainly integrating it into chemistry, the central science, is, I think, an important thing. So thank you again for that.
Wonderful.
Folks, good.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Good. Folks, this concludes our webinar. Lots of interesting chats going on in the webinar and the chat window, people sharing information. I really like when that happens. As Bob mentioned, we invite you to register or look at our upcoming series of webinars. Take a look at that link right there. See it, nanoforme.org webinars. and we bombard you with emails about these things, so hopefully you'll be coming back. Again, our pleasure today to have people from, as I mentioned, 21 different states, 6 different countries outside of the U.S., just showing the wide range of interests here. If you happen to log in late for the webinar or you missed it, you can always view the recording, and we'll be sending that links. So that concludes our webinar today. Goodbye, everyone.